A single match thrown into a trash pile can legally erase your entire zip code. You will see how a tiny administrative shortcut to bypass environmental safety rules created a 540-degree underground inferno that slowly dissolved a town's physical, legal, and social existence. Later, we will look at a hidden 15-foot hole behind a pile of garbage that sealed the fate of an entire community. We will also examine the bizarre legal agreement that allows a tiny, aging group of residents to live directly on top of a toxic, smoldering furnace until they die. This is not a story about a sudden natural disaster. It is a slow-motion catastrophe triggered by a local council that wanted to save a few dollars by ignoring a simple safety law. The year is 1962. In the borough of Centralia, Pennsylvania, local leaders faced a mundane municipal problem: illegal trash dumping. To solve it, they decided to establish a new town landfill. They chose a spot that had been cleared by a man named Edward Whitney back in 1935. It was a massive, abandoned strip mine pit, measuring 300 feet wide, 75 feet long, and 50 feet deep. On paper, it seemed like an easy, empty vessel for the town's waste. But in reality, it was a direct gateway to a labyrinth of abandoned coal mines running deep beneath the streets. Choosing this site was the first major mistake. Under a 1956 Pennsylvania precautionary law, the town was legally required to obtain a landfill permit and conduct regular safety inspections. This law existed specifically because strip mines carried a known, highly destructive risk of causing underground mine fires. The council simply ignored it. The danger was not invisible. A regional landfill inspector named George Segaritis stepped forward to sound the alarm. He contacted a local councilman named Joseph Tigg with a clear, urgent warning. Segaritis pointed out that this particular abandoned strip mine pit had visible holes in its walls and its floor. He explained that these openings connected directly to the old mine workings below. He told the council that the pit absolutely needed to be filled with non-combustible material before any trash could be dumped there. This simple step would have sealed the pathways and kept any surface flames from reaching the coal seams, but doing so required time, effort, and money. The council ignored the warning. They proceeded to use the open pit as a dumping ground anyway, choosing convenience over safety. They believed they could manage the risks without following the state's safety guidelines. On May 27, 1962, the Centralia Council decided it was time to clean up the landfill in preparation for the upcoming Memorial Day holiday. Instead of hauling the trash away, they chose another shortcut. They hired 5 volunteer firefighters to perform a controlled burn of the landfill. The firefighters lit the trash pile on fire, letting the flames consume the garbage. Once the surface trash was burned down, they used water to douse the flames. They believed their job was done and left the site. But deep within the compacted layers of waste, the fire did not die. It continued to smolder quietly, invisible to the eye. Over the next several days, the firefighters returned multiple times to pour more water on the site, but they failed to permanently extinguish the fire. It was already seeking an escape route. What the firefighters did not know was that the fire had already found a way out. During subsequent cleanup efforts, workers made a chilling discovery. Hidden behind a massive pile of unburned garbage in the north wall of the pit was a giant hole. It measured 15 feet wide and several feet high. This was the exact type of opening the regional inspector had warned them about. The garbage had completely concealed it from view, allowing the fire to feed directly into the exposed coal veins. The flames had bypassed the surface entirely and entered the vast, oxygen-filled labyrinth of abandoned mines. By the time this gap was discovered, it was too late. The fire had escaped into a network of tunnels that stretched for miles, far beyond the reach of any fire hose. The shortcut had officially backfired, and the underground coal had begun to burn. By July 2, 1962, the consequences of the fire began to creep into the daily lives of the residents. Foul, sulfurous odors from the smoldering landfill began wafting through the town, eventually reaching as far as St. Ignatius Church. It was a constant, physical reminder that something was deeply wrong beneath their feet. Residents complained about the terrible smell and the health risks of the fumes. Yet, the Centralia Council refused to stop. They continued to permit trash dumping in the very pit that was feeding the fire. They chose to normalize the threat rather than shut down the landfill and address the disaster head-on. This pattern of denial allowed the fire to grow stronger, eating its way deeper into the earth. It was no longer just a landfill fire. It was now a subterranean engine of destruction. Now, ask yourself a different question. What happens when the very ground you walk on becomes your enemy? You might assume the state would step in immediately to put out the fire and save the town. But the true tragedy of Centralia is not just the fire itself. It is the slow, agonizing dissolution of the town's entire structure. At the heart of this fire, temperatures quickly exceeded 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit, which is over 540 degrees Celsius. This extreme heat did not just burn coal. It created highly lethal clouds of carbon monoxide and other toxic gases that began rising through cracks in the soil. The fire was burning at depths of up to 300 feet, stretching over an 8-mile span that eventually encompassed 3,700 acres. It was a massive, underground monster, completely out of control. As the years dragged on, the physical structure of Centralia began to crumble. The extreme heat from 300 feet below caused the ground to warp and crack. Roads split open, releasing plumes of toxic white steam into the air. Gardens died as the soil temperature skyrocketed, cooking plants from the roots up. The physical reality of a burning foundation made normal life impossible. The population, which stood at approximately 1,500 residents in 1962, began to steadily decline. People realized that their homes were sitting on top of a toxic furnace. The carbon monoxide levels in some basements became deadly, forcing families to install gas detectors just to sleep safely at night. The community was slowly suffocating, both physically and socially, as neighbors began to flee the creeping danger. The final blow to Centralia did not come from the fire, but from the legal system. In 1992, the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania took a drastic step. Under the power of eminent domain, the state claimed all real estate in Centralia and officially condemned the entire borough. This meant that homeowners no longer legally owned their properties. The government declared the town unsafe for human habitation. The physical structures were slated for demolition, and residents were paid to leave. Then, in 2002, the United States Postal Service dealt another symbolic blow by discontinuing Centralia's zip code. The town was erased from the mail system. It was a legal annihilation of a community that had existed for over a century, all trace of its identity systematically wiped away by the state. Yet a few stubborn souls refused to abandon their homes, leading to a strange legal standoff. On October 29, 2013, a unique agreement was reached between the state and the last remaining residents. This agreement allowed the 7 residents who were still living there to stay in their homes for the rest of their lives. Once they pass away, the properties will revert to the state, and the homes will be demolished. By 2017 and leading into 2020, that number had dwindled to only 5 residents. These 5 people live as ghosts in a town that officially does not exist, surrounded by empty streets, overgrown lots, and warning signs. They are the final witnesses to a disaster that started with a single, unauthorized trash fire in 1962. The Centralia mine fire continues to burn today. At its current rate, scientists estimate that the fire could continue to burn for over 250 years. It is a sobering monument to the catastrophic power of a minor municipal shortcut. When the local council decided to ignore environmental safety laws to handle illegal dumping quickly, they did not just start a fire. They signed the death warrant of their entire community. The physical buildings may have crumbled, the zip code may be gone, and the streets may be empty, but the fire remains, a quiet, hot reminder of what happens when safety regulations are treated as optional. One small shortcut can slowly dissolve an entire world. If underground structures and engineering disasters fascinate you, the story of how massive modern tunnels are built under active rivers is next. Subscribe to catch it.